Okay, so when last we spoke, we discussed the branch line case and why that seemed to be a problem for the psychological criterion. It looked like maybe the branch line case showed that teleportation, which should work, it should be you on Mars if the psychological criterion is right. Maybe that's wrong. Now, Parfit says, you know, as he says at the end of these 3 chapters, would I teleport? He said, well, I would probably have intuitive doubts, but, you know, I'd have to go back over my philosophy and really remind myself of the philosophical cases. And if I did that, then I would use it. But if you're squeamish, you can still save the psychological criterion, because relation R has built into it. It says that you have to have the psychological connections, and they must have the right kind of cause. And he believes that any cause is okay. So if there's a person on Mars that has your memories, it doesn't matter that the reason they have those memories is that a machine implanted them. Because it's still the right kind of cause, because if you trace the reason why the machine implanted them is because it got them from you on Earth. So there is this connection. They're not just random. But, you know, it's not the normal way that people acquire their memories. The normal way that I acquire the memories of me an hour ago is by having the same brain. And that's the narrow or normal kind of cause. And if you if you don't like teleportation, then you can still be committed to the psychological criterion if you just say the right kind of cause is narrow. That means in order for these memories, the memories that I have of being that person an hour ago, to make me that person an hour ago, is the reason I have these memories has to be that I have the brain, that they were lodged in the same brain. So you can sort of bring in a physical element to the psychological criterion by saying the reason why I have this psychological connection is because of the normal cause, which is by having the same brain. And if you do that, then you're still committed to the psychological criterion, but you just wouldn't teleport. So maybe you can avoid that criticism there. Now, there's still the problem that I said that Parfit had a solution to, which is this problem that of circularity. That is, I am what I remember, but what makes something a memory is that it happened to me. And therefore you're defining self in terms of memories, and then you're defining memories in terms of self. The solution to that circularity problem is what Parfit calls quasi memories. And what quasi memories are he says, I have an accurate quasi memory rather than a memory of a past experience if first I seem to remember having an experience. So there's obviously, you know, I think something happened. Someone did have the experience. So in other words, it wasn't just obviously, we want to rule out some mad scientist just tinkering with my brain and making me believe things that never happened. We want them to have actually happened for it to be a memory. But notice it says someone, it doesn't say I had those memories. Because if it said I have those memories, then we're back to the circular problem. But if you can define quasi-memory without bringing in the notion of me, then it's okay to use memories to define what me is. So someone, not necessarily me, did have this experience. And the third criterion of being a quasi-memory is my apparent memory is causally dependent, that is, was caused by, in the right kind of way, that past experience, on that past experience. So in other words, again, it wasn't caused by some mad scientist. So in other words, the existence of this quasi-memory, it is a quasi-memory if the reason it's in my mind is that it was in this brain without being tinkered with throughout my history. So notice that doesn't say anything about me. So it defines, and if what I am is defined in terms of quasi-memories, then we haven't got the circularity problem. Now, it will, you can have quasi-memories of somebody else, in theory, if we allow the right kind of cause to be fairly wide. If we allow it to be narrow, then you would have just quasi-memories of things that happen to your body. But he imagines the right kind of cause being fairly wide, and he gives the Venetian memories case of where Paul has been to Venice, Jane hasn't. Some of Paul's brain tissue is transplanted into Jane's brain, and so she has this sensation of being in Venice and seeing these images. Incidentally, Parfit is a huge fan of Venice. If you look at the cover of Reasons on Persons, which is going to be reversed for you, that's a photograph he took of Venice. Parfit was a weird person, and a friend of mine met him and said he was, and the friend of mine is a philosopher, a very good philosopher. He ended up at Oxford. But he said Parfit was kind of unbearable because he wouldn't talk about anything else. You know, you couldn't talk about sports, you couldn't talk about music. It was just philosophy all the time. Except Parfit also liked photography and was a huge photography buff. And he insisted on that picture of Venice being on the cover. He should have tied it to this Venetian memories example, but in fact he just he made an excuse for it being there by adding a little bit to the book that made it relevant. But he really wanted that photo. I can't say I'm a big fan of the photo myself, but he liked it. Anyway, so Venetian memories is an example of where Jane quasi-remembers something that didn't actually happen to her. You obviously can't remember something that didn't happen to you because memory has built into it. It has to have happened to me, but you can quasi-remember it. Now, there's another criticism of the psychological criterion, and that is that there must be this ongoing subjective experience. It's not enough for me just to have a memory. It must be, I am not my memories, says this criticism. I am the thing that has the memory. So the memories actually aren't important. In other words, this criticism of the psychological criterion says you're focusing on the wrong things. You're saying the memories make the person. So if there are memories in this brain of something happening an hour ago, then the person that it happened to is the same as me. So the memories are important. And this dates back to Locke. Locke is very insistent on this. But critics of Locke said, no, it's not the memories, it's the thing that has the memories. I am not my memories. I am the person that has the thing that has the memories. And this idea of a subjective experience is kind of a reductionist idea. Sorry, a non-reductionist idea, that there is this thing that persists throughout your entire existence that is you and is indivisible and unchanged. This is the thing that, as a reductionist, Parfit rejects. He says there's nothing about me that doesn't change. I'm more like a river. You don't have to have this persisting thing always existing. Someone who seems to believe this is Parfit's sort of buddy and rival, this guy called Bernard Williams. Parfit was at Oxford, Bernard Williams was at Cambridge, and Bernard Williams and Parfit sort of sparred with each other throughout their philosophical careers. And Williams gives this ingenious example to as a sort of counterpoint to things like Locke's Prince and the Cobbler. So Locke's Prince and the Cobbler example gets you to believe, oh, what matters is psychological continuity and not bodily continuity, because the Prince and the Cobbler swap psychologies, or well, do they swap psychologies or do they swap bodies? But everybody says, oh, the person who thinks they're the cobbler, even though they have the prince's body, that's the cobbler. So it's the psychology that's important and not the body. Well, Williams says, I can give you an example that will make your intuitions go the other way. And it's the torture case. And it goes like this. I'm about to be operated on by some callous neurosurgeon without anesthetic. so I will be in pain, and I'm not looking forward to this. The neurosurgeon tells me, just after the pain starts, with plenty more to come, he will give me amnesia. Now, does this give me less reason to dread what is coming? Asked Williams. Notice that on Locke's theory, it should. Because on Locke's theory, if I get amnesia, then the person who is going to be suffering in the future won't be me. It will be somebody else. So, you know, if I'm told somebody, not you, will be tortured in an hour, I might feel sad for them, but I won't dread it because it won't be happening to me. But what Williams says is you do dread it, even though you know that you're going to get amnesia. And why? Because you know you're the body and not the psychology. Next, he tells me, the example goes further, he'll give me Napoleon's memories. Next, he will give me Napoleon's character. So in other words, if I was Locke, I should think, oh, Napoleon's going to be tortured in an hour. I'm going to get off. Now, so Williams wants to say, look, it's a draw. You've got your Prince and the Cobbler that seems to show its psychology. I've got my torture case that seems to go its physical. We should throw both of them out and just focus on the arguments. You can't go with intuitions. I don't know. I think in this case, look, if I know I'm going to get amnesia, I might think, well, then I'm not going to exist anymore. So that's going to be even worse. But what Williams would say is, no, you're still anticipating the pain. The pain is what you're worried about. And if Locke was right, it wouldn't be happening to you. It would be just happening to your old body, but it would be a new person in the body. But you think it's going to be happening to you. Well, says Parfit, okay, that's your example. How about this, Williams? And this is where he brings in the three spectra. I guess the plural of spectrum should be spectra. The psychological spectrum, the physical spectrum, and the combined spectrum. Okay, what are those? Well, what you got to imagine is you got to imagine a person at one end of the spectrum who is essentially you, no change. And then at the other end of the spectrum, if it's the psychological spectrum, your physical body will have changed. So what doesn't change is your psychology. Whereas if it's the physical spectrum, what doesn't change is your body, but your psychology does. So in the psychological spectrum, this body has all your psychology, and this body has all of your psychology, but it's made of completely new atoms. So on the psychological view, this is the teleportation case. So this body has no atoms in common with this body. Physically, it's completely changed. Now, what the point of these spectra is that there's a huge range of degrees. That is, in this one, it's you, all the atoms are the same. Here, it's like maybe 25% of your atoms have changed. And you ask the question, well, is that still me? I know this is me. Is that still me? 25%. Yeah. All right, what about here? 50% of the atoms have changed. Is that still you? If you go from there to there, have you ceased to exist and it's someone new? Because people who are scared of teleportation says, if I go from there to there, this isn't me. It's just a duplicate with my psychology. It's a clone who thinks it's me. But it's not me. I've died. I've ceased to exist. And Parfit says, well, okay, what if you go a quarter of the way? Have you ceased to exist? I mean, obviously, if you go a very little way and only a few atoms have changed, nobody believes that ceases to be you, because that happens to you all the time. What he says is, okay, I want you to tell me, draw me a line when it ceases to be you, so that on this side of the line, it is you, you survive. On the other side of the line, you've gone, and this is just a clone that thinks it's you. He says, if you have to draw the line, any place you draw it at will be totally arbitrary, because the only difference to what's on one side of the line and what's on the other side of the line is like a couple of atoms. And how is it that a couple of atoms can make all the difference between whether it's you or not you, whether you live or you die. He says that's ridiculous. So that's why the psychological spectrum, to me, says the only sensible way to deal with this is to say that they're all you. Because then you don't have to draw a line. Because obviously this is you. It's you. You know, it's got your psychology and your atoms. Now, you critics of the psychological spectrum say this is not you. But all right, then you have to draw a line, and any point is arbitrary. Now, in response, someone like Williams can give the physical spectrum, where this one, where it's the same body in both places. This is your body, this has all the same atoms. But what changes is the psychology. So, like in his case, this person has all the psychology of Napoleon. Now, where do we draw the line? How much do you have to how much do you have to retain of your psychology to be you? And this should work against the psychological criterion. But what Parfit wants to say is, here's what I think that actually shows. It shows reductionism. And we're going to spell out more what reductionism. And what that shows is, he says, what reductionists believe is it's genuinely an empty question whether or not it's me. And that's a radical thing to say, because he says, at some point in the middle here, where, you know, it's 50% you and 50% Napoleon, there is no answer to the question, do I survive? Any answer you come up with will just be arbitrary. So it's a genuinely empty question to ask, do I survive if half of my psychology gets replaced with Napoleon's? He says, empty question. There's no answer. All I can say is the thing that exists there is 50% your psychology, 50% Napoleon's. Is it you? I don't know. And what someone like Williams says is, well, that's ridiculous. How can it be an empty question to ask, do I live or do I die? And this is where reductionism is radical, and we'll get to that. The combined spectrum, though, is, again, really hammers this point home. Because the combined spectrum, he says, you change both psychologically and physically. So that at one end, it's you, your psychology, your atoms. On the other, it's Greta Garbo. Literally, she was an actress. I don't know, she was probably still alive in the 80s. She was a bit old. She famously was a huge star in the 30s and 40s, and then she just retired. She famously said, I want to be alone. There's a great movie with her in called Ninochka, which I recommend. But, you know, if you like, don't think of Greta Garbo. Think of, I don't know, Meryl Streep or somebody like that. Kate Blanchett. She can act anybody. She acted Bob Dylan in a movie. So, anyway, this is Kate Blanchett. Atom for atom, Kate Blanchett. All her psychology, this is you. At what point, changing your psychology and your physical makeup change, at what point does it stop being you? And he says it's an empty question. Obviously, round here, it's still you. Obviously, here, it's Kate Blanchett. But where in the middle does it cease to be you? It's an empty question. That is one of the crucial points about reductionism, as he says on page 235. There is not a real difference here between the resulting persons being me and being someone else. This is why, even though I do not know whether I am about to die, I know everything. This is a really weird thing to say. And he says, look, the only two options that the spectrum argument leaves us with is it leaves us with reductionism, which says that it's an empty question whether it is me or not. And again, I'm going to explain a bit more about that in the next chapter. or belief in a kind of non-reductionism, which says that there's a Cartesian ego. There's a thing that really does exist. So that would make it, the way to tell if it's me or not is, do I have the same soul? Because the soul or mind is what, and that's the way to answer the question. Is the soul the same? Then it is me. Is the soul different? Then it isn't me. So the non-reductionist who believes in a Cartesian ego can give a non-arbitrary way to draw the line. Is the soul there? Then there's your answer. Is the soul not there? Then there's your answer. Because it's the presence or absence of this thing that never changes that solves the question. Anything else, for example, Williams doesn't believe in a soul, but he wants to be a non-reductionist. And Parfit says the spectrum shows that it's not possible. He says you should start thinking, reductionist says you should think of a person as like a club. Imagine there's this club that exists, and then it disbands. And then a new club forms 10 years later with the same name. Is it the same club? It's got the same name. Is it the same club? And he says it's an empty question. Any answer, you could say it is the same club, fine. You could say it isn't the same club. But there's nothing that you're going by to answer that question. You're just making shit up. And he says at that point, that's what you're doing if you're saying that's me. Sure, say it's you. It doesn't change the facts. All that the facts are the psychology and the physical stuff. If you say it's you, you're just saying that. You're not going by anything. Only if you're a non-reductionist that believes in souls, and you can detect souls, you would have something to go on. But given that non-reductionism with souls is false, because if it wasn't false, reincarnation would be possible. And he describes a possible case that would be evidence for reincarnation, the Japanese woman remembering the Celtic bracelet or whatever. And he said, we don't have that evidence, so we have no good reason to believe that that's true. So given that that's false, you should be a reductionist. And we'll say more about that in chapter 12.